Okay, so look, I'm gonna tell you like this. The less I knew, the more I did. And I'm gonna say it again. The less I knew, the more I did. And so I just really want to tell you to just get out here and make it happen. Like, stop learning. Stop consistently just trying to learn. It's good to learn. You got to know what you're doing, right? But at the same time, your biggest success will come from hands on. It's not going to come from you just knowing things in theory. It takes like muscle memory to do what you got to do. And then a lot of times, the things that you are doing, it can kind of vary. So I'll give you a story real quick. I remember when I was in barber school, a real good friend of mine, he was kind of partnered with me in barber school. Man, we had this thick book. I'm talking about this book was thick. And dude had read this book probably about 4 or 5 times, like no joke. Very smart dude, right? After reading this book, 4 and 5 times and not really ever cutting hair, he struggled to just get out of, knowing the theories and going ahead and just cutting hair, right? He would come to me all the time asking me, can you teach me? Can you teach me? And I would try to teach him, but he always had that fear of just messing people up. And I told him, I said, man, that's part of the game. That's part of how it is, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I done gave some people some bad haircuts in my time, right? And so I simply had to break it to him and just tell him, like, I'm not going to mention his name, but I had to tell him, I said, look, bro, I said, the thing is, in theory, you know more about cutting hair than I do. And I've been cutting, shoot, since I was like 12 years old, right? And I told him, I said, you know more about cutting hair than I do, but I'm better at cutting hair than you are because of my experience. And I told him, I said, man, you just have to get out here and you have to work. You know what I'm saying? You have to try it, because a book can only tell you so much. Learning can only tell you so much. At some point, you have to stop learning and you have to just start doing. And as you are doing, you get to learn a lot more. And so, sometimes we get caught up in the thing of just feeling like that we are unprepared. We don't have enough information. We don't have. Sometimes you learn through doing stuff, and I think, even as you go back to thinking about, how to function through life a lot of times, you learned a lot of stuff by just watching other people do it. Like, you probably could have learned how to work on cars by watching your, mother, father, whoever worked on cars, big brother, somebody, uncle, somebody just, working on cars, and you started to see what they were doing and you like, you know what, I can do it. Then you tried to do it. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't necessarily in the books. It wasn't necessarily you didn't necessarily have to open a book to learn how to do it. And so what I'm saying is that at some point, all of us, even professionals, sometimes feel like they ain't ready for certain things. You have to go ahead and make it up in your mind that you are just going to go ahead, jump out there and do it. And so, I'm just telling you from my own experience, because there are things that, I learned and learned and learned. And, you know, a lot of times just learning in theory is like, it can be kind of beneficial to help you, just to learn the ins and outs. But sometimes, even going back to what I said, the less I knew, the more I did. So even think about like me doing music, for instance, right? Uh, when all I knew how to do was press record on my DAW, my software or whatnot, and buy beats from people, I feel like I was more effective. I feel like I got more done. But once I started learning how to make beats, start learning how to mix and stuff or whatever, I had a friend of mine, old out, he taught me how to do a lot of my mixing and stuff. And then a lot of that, even, he could only teach so much. I had to go and apply it and find what worked for me or whatnot. But, you know, as I started to do more, as far as learning more, I felt like I was less productive. And, I guess depending on the type of person you are, you have to watch, because, when I was just purchasing beats from people, I wasn't, over analyzing the beats. I was like, man, this thing slam, this stuff is nice, and now I can rap on them, right? But when I started making the beats and learned how to make the beats, it was amazing for me, because I'm learning this new skill. But then I started over analyzing. Dang, does the snare sound like I needed to? Is the kick hitting like I needed to? What should I have put extra in this beat? Should I have put this here, put that here, did it? I felt like I was just so hard on myself and focused on the wrong stuff when, you know, all I really wanted to do was get a message out, you know, via rapping. You know what I'm saying? But like pretty much I just did so much overthinking on some of the things that really didn't matter, you know. And I'm not gonna say the beat don't matter, but it was a lot of things that I shouldn't have been focused on. You know, if I was still in that mode of just purchasing beats from people and doing all of this type of stuff, I felt like I could have got more of what I wanted to say across. And ultimately that was the goal of getting what I wanted to say across or whatnot, you know. And so in a lot of areas in life, we can overextend ourselves trying to do stuff that we should probably let other people do, that we should, you know, not be so concerned about. And so, you know, there's a good thing in learning, but there's also a bad point in learning. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, you know, the more that you know about something, you know, what I'm training myself to do in these days is to just start applying, right? Start doing things, start, you know, putting in the work. Like I'm one of those type of people, I overlearned so much that I'm tired of learning. I just got to put the work in. I got to do. And that's what I'm doing is just doing. So in this stage in my life, I'm just going back to the basics. I'm learning what I need to do in order to get a job done and doing it. You know I can fall into that thing of, you know, perfectionism and doing too much. And so for me, what I need to do is just do. Not do, but do. And so anyway, like, you know, that's where I'm at. And so, like I said, the less I knew, the more I did. And so I just keep saying that, you know, the less I knew, the more I did. So hopefully you are not one of those people like me. Hopefully you can get out here and stop learning and just do. But if you think about it, you actually learn as you are doing. So, you know, just put the work in, make it happen. And yeah, once again, stop overthinking. But anyway, I'm Damien, and until the next video, I'm out. Peace.